Hi, lovely people. So, I am now ready to share my experience of being transported to parts of the Amazon forests, sitting with plant medicine, and sitting with Mama Aya, as I call her in particular. I've been still trying to synthesize what happened. Because if you don't know me, by the way, I'm Yemi Pen. I'm so many things, tired of giving this long slur, but I basically do whatever sets my soul on fire. I also made the decision to unsubscribe from fuckery a couple of years ago. And what I mean by that is I appreciate that there have been different ways in which we are meant to show up in the world. You know, I called it the memo, the fact that there was this memo that everybody seemed to be following, and it felt like I was royally screwing it up. And so I thought I was broken and all these other things. Until I started to check in where they come from and acknowledging that it has served its purpose, it hasn't served its purpose for everybody. I think it's absolutely nonsensical that we can be so many different things, different beings. I mean, you look at the world we live in, biodiversity. Everything has a role because of its difference, yet difference is the one thing we can't seem to celebrate as humans. And so I decided to unsubscribe from that and just start to ask really high quality questions that sometimes trigger people. And that's never my intention. My intention is to experience life to its fullest, to do it with compassion. And I'm not always there yet. Sometimes I am savage. But I'm learning to come from a place of love. I'm trying to remember where this came from, but that's kind of like an introduction to who I am. More recently in the now, I've started a PhD. It's been 6 months and it's now beginning to kick my butt as my supervisors ask me to submit words. And my primary PhD question is, can trauma be transformative? And what roles do traditional cultures play in either healing or resolving it? Now, for any of you who are deep in research, I'm going to need some guidance, some love. But, you know, for research, you've got to ask everything. So I need to investigate what resolving means, what healing means, what trauma means, and who's given definitions to trauma. Do we have a diverse range of trauma? Do we just have it from the neuroplasticity perspective? Do we just have it from the psychotherapy world? Is there much research on socio-cultural understandings of trauma? So these are things that I'm going to research about, and I guess at some point I'll be giving my own recommendations. But let's rewind just a little bit, and especially when we come to the traditional cultures, because, you know, celebrating difference here. Black woman, originally from Nigeria but was born in the UK. I now live in Sydney, but whenever I get to travel, I want to travel. But I remember cultures and cultural practices that my grandmother and my mother and my, you know, mainly the matriarch kind of instigated. And yet there were times we thought, what is happening? But now I'm older, I can go back and see how we stigmatized that, how we made it appear savage. But yet we still have the Western world tapping into some of these ancient traditional modalities. So I'm really intrigued. I want to go back to the future. Yeah, you heard me. I want to go back to the future, because trust me, especially being on indigenous land, I'm currently on Awabakar land out in Lake Macquarie, of the indigenous Australian people, original Australian people. It's trying to go back to what was always there. We are eventually going to tap back into that as we continue to deplete our natural resources. So I'm really intrigued to learn more, especially from those who effectively started with not much of what we have here today. Okay, so in saying all of that, my whole journey on trauma began when I decided to investigate my own personal story. Now, I gave in my TED Talk. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it, share it with people. I share my story, and I do acknowledge that, let's be fair, we're probably reaching 100%, but the stats at the time was about 70% of people would have experienced at least one distressing event. And I think more than one. And this isn't a trauma fest. This isn't trying to figure out who's had worse pain than the other. This is about saying, if you have had any pain, any distressing event, whether psychological or physical, my invitation to you is to just check in on yourself with love, compassion, no judgment, and make the decision to either look into it a bit further. And I know, because I remember going to psychologists and saying, look, I ain't got time for this shit because I got kids to look after. So I need you to just like open me up and then sew me right back up. And that really was my thought. And I get it and I empathize. And I've evolved over that, and I will share in coming days, weeks, months, years, decades, just what that journey has been. But I'm still very protective of it. But at the same time, I also want to teach and I want to learn. And so for me, I continue to look at my own trauma, especially the one that I think had the biggest impact on me. The others I've been able to work through, or so I think, but I've been able to work through. But for me, mine was child sexual abuse. And that was me as a child and a close relative within the family, not immediate family, but the next level, who abused his power. And I've got a documentary on this. It's on YouTube. It's the 20-minute version. So just look, if you've subscribed, you can have a look at it. If you haven't subscribed, definitely subscribe and hit the reminder button so that you can get updates whenever I share more tidbits. But you can watch the 20-minute documentary there. And it's titled, Did I Choose My Trauma? And I explain what happened. And, you know, I think I do it in such a delicate, lovely way because traumatic subjects do feel taboo. I'm really confused with the way humans have structured themselves to be able to acknowledge that wars happen, to be able to acknowledge that atrocities happen, yet we still tabooify. I like creating words. We tabooify certain things, and I want to break that stigma, but also do it in a way that's really delicate and loving, and a safe space for the person not just telling their story, but for the people receiving it. And so for me, I'm still working on my journey. And even though I'm doing my PhD research, and I will be part of it because I'll be doing a documentary on that, and I'd love to hear some more stories for anybody who's open. So I'll share more on how you can be part of that. But as I continue my own healing journey, my own resolution and wanting to understand, I wanted to look into alternative modalities. You know, you've heard people talk about, you know, different plant medicine, whether it's cacao, mushrooms. And I know this happens in other parts of the world, which is why, you know, when I do eventually plan a retreat, I will be taking people outside of Australia and have people from all over the world come. But I was really interested in this ayahuasca ceremony that people speak about. Now, I need to explain who and how I operate. I have never done drugs. Hand on heart, I'm a South London Brixton girl, but I've never done drugs, never tried weed. The closest thing I've ever done was a puff of a cigarette, and I think I was 15 or 16 years old. The most intoxicated I've ever been is because I had 3 glasses of wine. I don't do that for any other reason than I don't have a grey area. So I'm one of those people that I can get quite addictive to stuff. So I literally do enough research to know, well, if I got too dependent on this, it's going to be a slippery slope. So that's my personality. So sitting with Mama Aya was going to be a challenge. And it had been a whole year. I had to warm myself for a year. But in doing that ceremony, and this is where I want to share parts of it with you. There are 2 times I sat with them. They call them ceremonies. In doing that ceremony, I was transported again back to Africa, Nigeria in particular, where I would see elders also commune on some level with plants. You know, there are so many shows that are being done at the moment. I think you've got, you know, Obama doing great national parks, and I haven't watched it yet on Netflix, but there is something attached to nature they're talking about. You know, Sir David Attenborough, who I absolutely love and has been a big part for the work that I'm doing, and hopefully the work I will be doing in the future, where he's really trying to get us to connect back to nature, plants and animals. And then you've got Rebecca Barry and the rest of her team who have done the Back to Nature series that I just love, which is this educational series here in Australia. I don't know if they go to Tasmania, but here down under, as I say, where we're being given the history of plants. You can't deny that for decades, people have been talking about the qualities. I almost want to say the living beings that are our plants. And so I naturally was not even inquisitive. This was a calling for me. Let me be really honest. This was a calling. This was Yemi, it's time. And there was nervousness, and it took a few goes before I was able to physically get myself there. But sitting with Mama Aya was huge. And I'm going to spend the next kind of 5 minutes telling you what came up for me. And I'm going to do this in tidbits because I'm still synthesizing, I'm still integrating. But I know that as each day goes on, sometimes my memory isn't as great, and I made sure I scribbled. So before you sit with Mama Aya, and you can do research on this, you set your intentions. What is it I want to know? My intention for that first night, excuse me, my intention for that first night was clarity. I wanted clarity, wisdom, and I used the word awakenment because, you know, I think there's a post out there that says when you find yourself really uncomfortable, like, you know, when you like got a job or you're in a relationship or you're about to take a business deal and there's this discomfort but you can't explain it, that's where I was in life and kind of still am. Like, really, is this what life is about? We're talking about wars around the world. We're talking about people being treated differently because of their pigmentation. We're talking about gender inequality, which so many things, so many groups who are now coming out and saying, okay, enough's enough. We've given humanity as much time to get to a place of equality and equity, and we're still not there. And that's why there's more noise and unsettlement. And this was part of the reason why I went to sit with Mama Aya, because I wanted to know what I don't know. I wanted to try something different from the typical medical field, which has its role and its place. But you can't tell me there were not practices in indigenous cultures that during forms of colonization or westernization or whatever it is, it got trampled on, it got demonized. And yes, they come with risks. There are risks for everything. I've got a dear friend, I'm hoping she says yes to come on to my next documentary. We were talking about her cancer journey and we spoke about chemotherapy. Chemotherapy also has its downsides, but it's also there to help. And so when do we start to have that conversation on the fact that there's a balance with everything? So I know that sitting with certain plant medicines around the world is being treated as an issue. And I think it's partly because a form of regulation can't be put on it, but that's a whole different conversation. And I appreciate the need for regulation. But I also question the integrity and the intentions of some of these huge conglomerates. I mean, all you've got to do is look at the way marijuana in the US in particular is migrating. I mean, there were many of different communities, Hispanics, blacks, who were put in prison for, you know, either selling marijuana or smoking a joint. And now, I mean, unless I'm wrong, I think you've got places like Amazon who are building these big buildings to start growing it as it's been legalized. Now, I might be off with some of my stuff, so by all means, my beautiful community, I ask you with compassion to update me and educate me on anything that might be my blind spot. But the point is, things are evolving. But have we been right? Have we been equal? Have we been just in how we've done it? I'm going all over the place, but I wanted to leave this blah to be whatever it needed to be. So let's go back. My first night ceremony sitting with Mama Aya, it was clarity, wisdom, and awakening that I wanted. And I tell you, I got it in droves. The only way I can describe what happened, you know, when you ask someone a question, you know, when you're not sure and you like go to that coach, or if you believe in God or Allah or any other deity or being, you ask a question and sometimes you're not sure if you can hear it. You keep on saying, please give me a sign. Everything was answered immediately. I'm talking immediately. The clarity was on point. I was asking questions, some really random ones, like, why are my feet always so cold? That was one of the first ones. The next one was, why did that happen in that relationship? And I would get these downloads of because you didn't, or you missed the opportunity to understand yourself more. And that's because this happened. The other one that really blew my mind was when I started to get fearful, because I did. I have some challenges in life, and part of my challenge in life is I struggle to let other people have control over me. And there's a big one that I'm not going to share in this particular video because I'm being called to do something in a more delicate way, and I want to do this properly. But I don't like giving control to other people. And I knew for someone who has been as pure when taking anything alternative, I didn't know what was going to happen, especially as I know this is a purging plant. and I purged. I purged on the second ceremony, and that's going to be a different conversation. But I definitely was going to the bathroom, so I was letting loose. I was letting everything out. I'm sorry if you can't handle that, and you should not be watching this. But the question I had asked, where am I going with this? Oh, damn, I've completely forgotten. But the clarity that I was getting with a lot of the questions was really real. That was it. I didn't want to let go control. And obviously that was going to be difficult because I was about to go on the journey, go on a quest. I was going to ingest something that I knew was going to alter how I see things, but I still had control. You know, I knew when to get up. I remember music being played. I would dance. I knew when I needed to go to the bathroom. So there were still elements, but I would hear these loving whispers. And I remember, and the best way I can say it, and I call her mother or Mama Aya or God or whatever, it felt like there were different people. But I remember saying, I'm really scared. And I would get this immediate response of, what are you scared of? And it was of someone taking advantage. And this is the response I heard. Sorry, I'm just getting rid of a cough. It's a cough, it's nothing else. This is the response I heard. We are not like that. Only humans feel the need to lie, cheat, betray. We are not like that. We love you unconditionally. I mean, I think I wept. I wept because I am part of the human consciousness. I am part of the group of people who, when in fear, decide to bring out their own weapons. And history shows why we feel the need to do that over and over again. But I found peace in that first ceremony. I found peace in understanding that there is another way to be. And I think fear has a big role to play in this. If I was to do another PhD, and please tell me not to. I shouldn't even be thinking about it. I've still got another, 2 years to go. But I would be researching fear. I'd be going way back to the beginning. When did it come about? How did fear even get its title? Because for some reason, when that fear comes up, we act, I think, as humans in this barbaric way. And yes, that might have been our natural kind of disposition way back when we had to fight lions and any other kind of animal. I get that, but we've evolved. The question is, when we haven't been too busy, high on productivity and consumerism, have we forgotten that we need to change how we respond to things that might stimulate fear? But I had fear, and that was the first question. It was, we don't operate like that. And I wanted to know the mother more. I wanted to know Mama Aya more. I had so many questions, and then I got different people. So if you see me call you or send you a message and we haven't spoken in forever, it's because you came into my consciousness that day. You don't even need to go sit with plant medicine or any other plant medicine. There are times that you just have someone come into your mind. This was on tap for hours. I had no concept of time while I was out there. It was there for hours, but the information was coming. I even asked questions on why is what is happening in Russia happening. It was specifically Putin I was asking. And I obviously don't know the guy. I'm nowhere near as close to the story. Unfortunately, I have to be fed most of this through media. And where media has this great role, I'm also weary of it. I like to, dissect? But I like to just be conscious of what I'm taking in. And I'm not going to share what came up, but stuff came up. There was definitely fear of something. It was fear. We don't do this really more. We don't take human, plant life, any other form of life without an element of fear. And that's why, if there's anybody out here who's wanting to do a PhD, please do it on fear. Let's figure out what some of the solutions are. How can we manage our fear better? What other questions did I ask? Ask questions about my family. I had a conversation with my uncle, but was really interesting. And this is my uncle who, abused his sexual power over me. The conversation I had with him was partly his older self, but it was actually his little self. And I know that this is going to be nuts for some people to even comprehend, but just empty your cup for a second. And I'm talking about your knowledge cup. What if you could have access to a different paradigm? And yes, I'm sure people can access this. You know, sometimes that's what, you know, deep meditation can do. For some people, it's dancing. This is why I really want to go back to the future. But for me, I needed help. And that's one reason why I did that, because I wanted to know more than what I already know. I wanted to go deeper. And you've got some of the best leaders in the world. I don't know if anybody's watched, oh my gosh, I forgot the name. Something, The Wisdom of Trauma, Gabor Mate. He talks about this and says, you know, and I think he's a medical doctor of some sort, or has been, or a physician. And he talks how important this particular sitting with ayahuasca is. I'm really glad that I challenged myself and I worked through my fear. And yes, you do need to sit with someone who, you know, you've heard good things about. And I will be sharing a retreat that I'll probably be doing in the next year, 12 to 18 months. But we'll be going, it will definitely be in somewhere in Europe, or maybe South America, I don't know, with South America. You do need to find someone you trust. But I want to highlight the importance of what stepping out of our comfort zone looks like, and trusting, and learning the art of letting go. Because the clarity on what my next step should look like were real. And sometimes that's all we want. We just want a bit of clarity. Now, my second day, I got smacked about. Because my intention was, what is holding me back from living my fullest potential? And what got brought up scared the shit out of me. And like any good Netflix episode, I'm gonna pause here because it's 20 minutes. And I wanna ask you, please subscribe, connect with me on Instagram if you haven't already, invite your friends, and let's start a healing revolution. I'm gonna have a few videos on how you can be part of that. I'm gonna also share some ways in which you can maybe submit your own story if you want to take part in my next documentary. But for now, this felt good to let it out and to share. Sending you all the love, light, healing, wisdom, and everything in between. Mwah. Sawubona.